He's doing that. I'd like to ask everyone to put their name and agency in the chat for Cam for recording purposes so that we can do a good tally of people who are here with us today. So good morning, everyone. I'm Mayor Colleen Whitlow taking over for Commissioner Baker today. He is in another meeting. So with that, thank you very much. Next is public comment. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment at this time? Please just raise your hand and we'll call on you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will give it a second.
Okay.
And then just a reminder that if you are a member or alternate, please accept the panelist request so we can move you over. And with that being said, I do not see any hands raised, Madam Chair.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Next on our agenda is the November 19th, 2024 Regional Transportation Committee meeting summary. Are there any changes or comments at this time? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to the consent item. There are two items on the consent this morning. The first one is fiscal year 2024 Transportation Improvement Program first year delays, and the amendment to the 2024-2025 Planning Work Program. Is there a motion to recommend to the Board of Directors staff to continue each project?
So moved, Shelley Cook.
Thank you very much. And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll move on to our action item for the action items. The first one is an innovative mobility set-aside project selection. I will turn over this meeting to Emily Lindsay, who is the active emerging mobility program manager. Ma'am?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
All right. All right, everybody can see my screen. Cam, can you give me a thumbs up? Perfect. All right. I'm Emily Lindsay. I manage our active and emerging mobility program in DRCOG's Transportation Planning and Operations Division. It's great to be here with you this morning to discuss our innovative mobility set-aside project recommendations. So just to give folks a quick overview of the innovative mobility set-aside, we have a total of $4 billion identified for the set-aside over a 4-year period, so about $1 million a year in the Transportation Improvement Program. These are staff-managed projects at DRCOG, so it's kind of a unique new approach to the set-asides. This is our inaugural year for the Innovative Mobility Set-Aside, so this is the first slate of projects that we're recommending for funding for the Innovative Mobility Set-Aside. The purpose of these projects is really to prepare the region for innovative mobility and to invest in collaborative learning opportunities. So really looking for those projects that can exemplify, newer approaches to emerging and innovative mobility topics, and that offer lessons learned for communities across the region. So the set-aside has a couple of goals. I won't get into all of these, but I think, again, really emphasizing approaching advanced and emerging mobility in new and exciting ways in the region, giving us all an opportunity to invest in learning about new topics, new approaches, and different ways to invest in our transportation system. So we're really looking at projects that are new, that are innovative in different contexts, that potentially are transferable across the region, and that really help us meet some of our MetroVision goals. So the selection process for the set-aside projects started with a letter of interest window. This was open in early September through mid-October. So it gave folks lots of time to kind of think about ideas, reach out to staff to talk about ideas. And then once project submittals closed on October 15th, a selection panel made up of multi-divisional staff from DRCOG, from our Transportation Planning and Operations Division and our Regional Planning and Development Division, reviewed all of the projects and evaluated them in the context of our evaluation criteria, which are listed in our TIP policy set-aside document. So really selected projects that were consistent with MetroVision, really supported the MetroVision Regional Transportation Plan priorities. These projects all had really strong collaborative components. They had letters of support from partners. These projects, as you might guess, were innovative in and of themselves. And so project sponsors were able to kind of make the case of why this project is innovative, why this approach might be innovative in a given context. These projects were potentially transferable across different land use types, across different community types in the Denver region. These projects were ready to go, and they also scored well in an equity component. So we received 16 letters of interest, so proposals, for the call for projects, which is super exciting. They really were a great kind of across the region representation for different communities of different sizes, different land use contexts, and the project types themselves, I think, were pretty varied, which is great because the innovative mobility kind of definition is a pretty broad umbrella. So we were excited about the breadth of projects, and the selection panel recommended the top scoring 7 projects. Again, we saw projects that were super innovative in nature. Some of them were innovative, across the industry at large. Some of them were very innovative in our region. They haven't been done before. Some of them were innovative kind of within their own context, right? Depending on the community type. Some of them had very strong collaborative components. Our top scoring project was a multi-jurisdictional project looking at data fusion. And so we're really excited about these. I did want to call out the Arapahoe County project, which also submitted a project proposal in the next agenda item. So you'll be hearing about that. So that's why that budget is a little bit smaller. We can kind of combine the 2 project efforts to fund that project. So the Arapahoe County project you'll be seeing again at the next agenda item. But we're really excited to explore things like digitizing the curb, thinking about safety and investing in near miss analytics. And then you'll see some mobility on demand, some microtransit, some mobility hub planning. Again, we're really pleased with kind of the breadth and scope of these projects, and I think we have a lot to learn as we get started with these projects. So these are the projects that the panel recommended. And I will put ahead of you a recommended motion, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Emily. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Emily at this time? Well, thank you very much, Emily. There is a motion in front of us. Would any of the directors or commissioners or other participants like to recommend this motion?
I'll move it. Skylar, AAA.
Thank you, Skylar, very much. Is there a second?
Second, Deborah Johnson, RTD.
Thank you very much. Okay, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, well, thank you very much for funding this 7 innovative mobility set-aside projects. It'll be exciting to see what happens and what's next. So thank you very much, Emily. Next is our Livable Centers Small Area Planning FY 2025 Set-Aside Project Recommendation. We have Caitlin Service, the program manager for it. Caitlin?
Thank you and good morning. I'm Caitlin Service. I'm a program manager in DRCOG's Regional Planning and Development Department, and happy to be here today to speak about the first round of selection for the Livable Centers program. Just a quick recap of the program. This is a technical assistance program. It is a set-aside identified in the 2024 to 27 Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP. The program uses consultant services to create small area plans that enhance livability in central locations for different communities that are on the regional multimodal transportation system. So the project goals and program evaluation criteria were adopted by the board in 2023. And a little refresher of what those are: the program goals are derived from MetroVision. They include supporting those livable centers and their connections to the region's multimodal transportation system, focus on coordinating land use strategies with a multimodal transportation strategy, and improving access to housing, transportation, and services in key central locations within communities. We conducted the call for letters of interest from August 14th to October 16th, 2024, and evaluated all the submissions based on criteria that was adopted by the board of directors in March of 2023. That evaluation criteria includes alignment with Metro Vision, benefits to marginalized communities, connections to the regional transportation plan, project readiness and local support, and innovation and transferability. So you'll see here the 12 submissions that were received, and then there are 7 recommended projects based on the evaluation criteria. The projects are recommended based on a strong alignment with the program goals and a really nice integration of land use and housing strategies with that multimodal transportation strategy. The project sponsors, the folks who submitted each project, provided an estimated budget in their letter of interest. And as we work with the municipalities and project sponsors during the scoping and procurement phase, we'll work to finalize those budgets once we define specific scopes of work. I have a motion up here up on the screen and also happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Caitlin. Is there any questions or comments for Caitlin at this time? All right, seeing none, there is a motion to recommend to the Board of Directors funding for the 7 livable centers for the small area planning projects as recommended by the selection committee. Is there a motion to approve this motion?
I will move that, Director Guzman.
Thank you, Director Guzman. Director Wheel, you would like to second that?
Second, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. All in favor, you say aye.
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 Any opposed? I would say that this meeting is running very fast, so just please speak up if you have any, questions for anyone that's what's coming up. So next is our discussion items. The first one is the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan Scenarios by Alvin Bedell Sanchez, our Regional Transportation Planning Program Manager. That's a long title there, Alvin. So you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'll get my screen going in presentation mode and we'll go through our presentation. So this is a follow-up to the discussion we had last month regarding scenarios. We have been before the Transportation Advisory Committee, RTC, the Board of Directors, and have received feedback from staff. And so we wanted to provide you what those compiled results look like from the Menti exercise that we completed, and then discuss what are some next steps with these results and how you can be seeing some of this moving forward. So reminder, scenario planning is one of the major activities that we've outlined for the update to our 2050 Metro Vision Regional Transportation Plan. We have been involved in conversations internally and with our various committees on the board this year. We're hoping to complete this in Q1, Q2 of next year. Just that way we can jump straight into our candidate project solicitation and evaluation phase. So just as this effort 4 years ago ended up changing the project mix that we ultimately included in the plan, we're hopeful that this scenario analysis this cycle will also have that same impact and help us refine the investment priorities in the regional transportation plan. In terms of schedule, we kicked this off internally with staff back in September of this year, incorporated staff feedback using that same Menti poll that we have provided to each of the committees and the board. In October, we had our first RTP intro update before the Transportation Advisory Committee and got feedback at that same meeting using that Menti poll. In November, we came before the Regional Transportation Committee with both the intro and the feedback, and only went to the board for an intro item at that point just to get them up to date on the kickoff that we were having for the Regional Transportation Plan. And so it was in December when we went before the board work session that we got feedback before our board members. We are here before each of the committees. We'll be going before the board tomorrow to share these compiled results, and then we'll begin defining these scenarios end of this year, moving into spring of next year, continue that defining of what these scenarios could look like, start modeling and testing, seeing if there's any quirks coming up as we test these scenarios, any surprises we might be getting out of the data that we want to run to ground, make sure that we trust the results that we're seeing, and then share the results with our committees and the board so we can start seeing how they can impact the investment priorities in the RTP. So I'm going to run through a word cloud for each of the 6 questions that we asked at each of the committees, the board, and our staff feedback. For each of these, there has been some theming involved. So if you look at this slide and you see older adults In this case, there might have been increasing older adults, more older adults, growing older adults. For this exercise, they've been themed under older adults, but the major responses to what are some major demographic shifts occurring in the region that could impact growth and mobility are a growing older adult population, that continued work from home trend that we're seeing in the region, fewer workers, slower population growth, all also came up. But as you look through this slide, maybe some other ones that could be of interest to test, growing diversity, fewer children, less funding is always a conversation during the regional transportation plan update. And so as we go through these results, there are potentially other ways that we are able to incorporate this feedback. And so I'll touch on some of those as they might pertain to particular questions and particular products we have here at DRCOG. Under emerging economic trends, e-commerce and work from home were the major responses that we heard from each of the bodies. Big interest in artificial intelligence, though. That one would be an interesting one. I bet the jury's still out on the potential impacts to transportation to growth in terms of what AI could provide to the region. Also some interest in a service-based economy. Could be an interesting one this cycle, but we are also kicking off an update soon to our multimodal freight plan. So that could be one way that we incorporate this feedback is one of our upcoming products. How can we explore a service-based economy potentially fuller than we could during the scenario planning exercise? In terms of this response, despite those 4 or 5 housing affordability major themes, you can see that there was a wide variety of responses. They might not have all risen to the level of working from home or e-commerce, but you can see quite a variety across this slide: increasing recreation, high cost of living, electric vehicles, increasing tourism. So a lot of responses for our emerging economic trends in the region. Technological advancements, there was a little more cohesion across those responses. Microtransit was a major response across each of the bodies. Interest in electric vehicles, artificial intelligence again, and then autonomous vehicles. Fewer responses in terms of making it to the major ones, so a little more cohesion as the group was responding on what are some potential technological advancements we could explore during this scenario cycle. One thing I would note around autonomous vehicles, we did attempt to test this 4 years ago with our former scenario cycle. And we, at that point, ended up showing a range of impacts. We still weren't sure whether autonomous vehicles would have a primarily positive, primarily negative impact on mobility in the region. So the ultimate results that came out of that was a range from potential positive to potential negative. So have conditions changed in 4 years for us to be able to test a little more? Potentially, but we'd have to run that to ground to check. But just a note that we have attempted to explore some of these in other analyses before. And then drone delivery, like I mentioned, you'll hear me touch on the freight plan a couple times. There's some great feedback here that we can use in our upcoming freight update to explore a little further in the region, seeing this interest from the various bodies. How can we incorporate that in future planning products that we have? Changes in land use patterns, density, infill redevelopment, you see pop off the screen pretty quickly. Still, though, an interest in office building vacancy and suburban development. A lot of this responses, obviously, coming from some state mandates. But as we work through these, how can we incorporate some of this into our land use model, our travel model? As you go through the screen, obviously, those are the major responses that we got, but there are still some other ones that could be of interest as you work through those. Less parking, aligning rail investments. Climate change came up in a number of these responses, though we do have a specific question around that later that we did ask. So in terms of environmental changes, wildfire was the major response we heard from each of our bodies, but water availability, heat, more extreme events in general came up. So it could be an interesting one to try and see how we could test these in either of our land use or travel models. And there are also other tools available for us as well, so we could potentially leverage those in addition to or in place of our 2 models. Could be some interesting preferences if you attempt to explore heat. How do potential travel choices get made differently? But something we need to explore. So similar theme for the potential disruptions or emergencies. In this case, flooding came up quite a bit, but wildfire stayed as one of those top 3, and water shortage, water availability stayed in as a major theme that we were hearing. For these last 2, there was a lot of synthesis cohesion around those responses. So you're seeing fewer numbers that are smaller on both of these slides, just indicating there were more folk highlighting the same thing across each of these responses. So a lot of interest in water availability in the region, flooding, wildfire, heat, more events in general. What are the impacts to transportation, to housing when each of these impacts occur? What does it mean to have disaster hardened infrastructure in the region? We already know it costs a lot to create these projects to begin with, to maintain these projects to begin with, but making them disaster hardened, disaster resistant, what does that do to the region's infrastructure, to our plan? So from all of those word clouds, those 6 slides, those 6 questions, the major themes that we heard, growing older adult population and their associated changes in needs and priorities. That was from how they might live in the region, the different services that they will need access to, potentially more of, and then just how they travel differently in the region, potentially using different services in new ways. Increasing disruptions and environmental impacts from climate change on our infrastructure. So those one-off events that can require redundancy, resiliency in the system, to potentially maybe some longer trend events. How can we test those? So like I touched on, what does a disaster hardened infrastructure look like for the region? How would we capture that in the regional transportation plan? The continued proliferation of new technologies, AI a lot more on the forefront than we were 4 years ago with everything coming out. Automation, autonomous connected electric vehicles continue to be an interest in the region. Like I mentioned, we did attempt to test that last cycle with autonomous and connected vehicles, but felt the jury was still out in terms of where that would ultimately land. So as we look at these new technologies, what can we lean on that's already out there that could help us shape what some of these impacts could be in the region? And then the staying power of post-COVID trends came up pretty consistently across those questions. The continued work from home trend that we're seeing, while there might be some declines in it, it's still quite a large number of folk working from home in our region. The increase in home delivery and e-commerce. So like I've mentioned, this will be an interesting one that we can potentially explore during the next freight plan update, not just here in the regional transportation plan or in this scenario analysis, but taking this feedback and using it in other planning products that we develop here at DRCOG. So in terms of the potential impacts of scenario planning, like I've mentioned, we really want to make sure that this scenario planning cycle revises our fiscally constrained list, gives us some guidance, some direction to have those discussions on what should our investment priorities be in the region. This was a major effort that really changed the project mix in the regional transportation plan 4 years ago. We want this effort to be just as momentous for the region. It might also just mean that we have additional information in the regional transportation plan around current conditions or potential policy stances or new guidance that we're able to provide. Chapter 2 of the RTP right now is really current conditions, and then DRCOG policy. So what is our stance on complete streets, on Vision Zero? What does our infrastructure condition look like right now? And so based on this feedback, we could potentially incorporate more information in the regional transportation plan in different ways. New metrics to evaluate priorities. Chapter 4 of the regional transportation plan is measuring success. So we pull together different metrics from MetroVision, outcomes from MetroVision, targets from our regional transportation plan, from other modal plans to see how the investments in the region will move the needle in various ways. Based on this feedback, are there new metrics that we could be considering to help evaluate projects, to help evaluate our progress in the region? And then, like I've been touching on throughout the slides I've been showing, just new guidance and direction for future planning activities as we kick off that freight plan update that I've mentioned, using some of this feedback to help potentially explore some of these interesting topics that came up during this scenario exercise, this Menti exercise. And before I get to my final slide, just a reminder that as we do scenario work here at the agency, historically, these have been large what if futures. We've never chosen a scenario. We haven't chosen recently a scenario based on this scenario work. It hasn't been, we went with travel choices at the expense of other scenarios last cycle. We ultimately were exploring what are some of the choices and trade-offs that occur when you make certain decisions in the region. So really, we're just wanting to have guidance and direction as we develop this plan. And so we don't anticipate having a batch of projects and then testing a different batch of projects and then selecting scenario C that comes out of that. And so we do expect this to continue to be a way for us to guide and direct the investments in the plan development, and have a high level understanding of what some potential changes at the regional level could be. And so next steps based on this feedback, we want to begin defining what are some potential scenarios based on this, and start modeling and testing. Do we think the two models are the appropriate tool? Are there other tools that could supplement this effort? We want to make sure we're testing. Like I noted, we want to see what are the results that start coming out of this? Do the results make sense? Is there anything that we want to run to ground to make sure we trust that result? And then as we get later into next year, I'm sharing those results with our committees and the board. We're hoping for the end of Q1, beginning of Q2 for this to occur. Last time we did this, it ultimately ended up being a 60 to 70 slide presentation of results. So we'll ultimately see what this cycle looks like, but we do want to make sure we're providing as much information as possible to help us as we get into our candidate project solicitation and evaluation phase of the RTP. And with that, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the information, Alan. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Ms. Cook.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Alvin. This is really important stuff. It's exciting to be involved at the get-go as you begin to define the things that will shape that planning. I've been thinking about the demographic predictions that we heard from last meeting. And I understand Mike Silverstein's point that we're in a better spot actually if we don't see the population growth expected. But the split, the share of older people versus younger workers, et cetera, is not as optimistic as I would like to see. I don't know if the state or if the region, but it seems like it might be wise to try to attract younger people, because when you have a greater share of older people, and I'm in that group, so I can say this, I think you see revenue impacts to cities and counties because older folks don't buy things that are taxed, they buy services more. And at least I've seen presentations about that. You have less vibrancy, I would think, because you don't have as strong an entrepreneurial group, or maybe. And then people may be less inclined to approve ballot issues that come forward, especially if they have dollars attached. And so that constrains the region and what it's able to do. So I'm just hoping that for a multitude of reasons, we can assume, or we can look at a scenario that bends that arc a little bit. So we don't see quite the stronger cohort or as strong a cohort of aging adults. And that therefore the planning can be more geared toward younger folks who will succeed us all, in short order here. So anyway, that's the point. I just wanted to see if we could not just accept that at face value, but assume the possibility of bending that arc so that we attract younger people who do move to the state. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Mr. Silverstein.
Yes, good morning, everyone. And Alvin, a question about the home delivery trend that you just touched on. Do you have an analysis or a technique approach to determine, hey, what is that offset? If we're all receiving a lot more home deliveries of our goods, you would assume then that we're out there shopping less, we're driving less. But is there an approach that you're taking that's that you could describe or maybe get back to us on how that analysis is looked at? I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, definitely too early to have an analysis in mind for what that could look like for this scenario cycle, but it is something that we can potentially explore through this effort. Or like I've mentioned, the freight plan update might be a more appropriate way to leverage other data that's available in the region using CDOT state plan update that just came through. But we can see what that analysis looks like and however that moves forward, either in the scenario work or in the freight plan effort, potentially bring back what that analysis ends up looking like.
Thank you for the question. Thank you, Alvin. Director Guzman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to piggyback a little bit off of what Director Cook said, which is to say, with the older folks, and I'm considering my grandparents when I talk about older folks and my mom, they're in that category as well.
I want to make sure that we're taking into consideration that any type of mobility issue is going to increase the need for a more hands-on approach, different type of service than we're used to. Obviously, we run buses and trains, but accessing the buses and trains for my grandparents is almost impossible at this point. One almost being 90 and the other one catching up right behind him. They can't lift themselves up to get on the trains. And so looking and thinking about how we access mobility through a variety of ways and services is going to be really important when we do this work. So it's not just the age, it's also the physical capacity that older folks may have. And not everybody's going to be the same. I'm thinking through a specific lens here, but that's not to say that they're discapacitated. They just can't stand at a bus stop and wait 15 minutes for a bus to arrive. And then when the bus gets there, step up onto the bus, right? That's the concern that I have. And so when we're looking at these different issues, particularly with the older generation, considering that as part of the planning will be really helpful. I think for some of those folks, and looking at alternatives to accessing networks will be really important too. My grandparents don't have a smartphone, so they're not going to be able to do access on demand, but they might be able to figure out something with Access-a-Ride or some other form of transportation or mobility option, depending on their need and what they have access to. So just something to keep in mind. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Is there any other questions or comments for Alvin? Oh, Director X.
Morning, everybody, and thank you. I wanted to address a comment that Alvin made with regards to the scenarios. And it's true, historically, we have not, chosen one of the scenarios to use as our baseline and future modeling, what's the word? Modeling scenario. I'll just say for sake of argument. But it really does help us inform, right? First of all, the modeling exercise itself, it's a sensitivity test, right? We're testing the alternates relative to the other alternates that we're testing, right? What moves the needle with regards to to transportation in general, right? And I know I'm not breaking new ground here, but there obviously is a synergy between density, mixed use, and transportation, right? Providing the best means and better mobility for folks when that scenario is in place. I would suggest that one, it does inform and help local governments in making land use decisions within their communities once they see some of the results of what we're showing. It also helps us with regional investment as well. Like in the last regional transportation plan, we put a fair amount of emphasis on bus rapid transit corridors, and that was in direct response to some of the scenario work that we had seen and the opportunities for the densification of around stations and TOD and all that kind of good stuff. So it's a very, very important exercise. But ultimately, yeah, Alvin is right. We do utilize what our forecasts are showing with regards to our population employment forecast to ultimately direct where those scenarios are going in the year 2050. So I just wanted to share that, but it is a very, very useful exercise for us.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? All right. So our next discussion item, number 9, the Crash Data Consortium update, that'll be postponed to a later date. The staff member is ill today, so we'll move on to the next discussion item, which is the annual congestion report by Mr. Max Monk, the assistant planner.
Morning, Chair, members of the committee. Apologies, give me just a moment to share my screen here. Alrighty, are we seeing the presentation okay? Great. Alrighty, good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. My name is Max Monk, and I'm an assistant planner, and today I'm here to talk about our 2023 annual report on traffic congestion in the Denver region. You'll see a lot of photos peppered throughout that are different than our usual presentations. And I just want to give credit now. A lot of those images are from CDOT and RTD, so thanks for letting us use your photography. Quick agenda. I'll provide an overview of the congestion management process. So why we do it, what it entails, so on. We'll talk about trends and observations we saw in 2023. This will include a look at vehicle miles traveled, transit ridership, insured micromobility usage. We'll talk about how we can expect congestion to look and feel in 2050 if the trends that we observed last year continue into the future. Every year, we try to take on a special topic analysis where we analyze something of interest. And this year, we elected to continue an analysis from the 2022 report, which looked at various commute corridors in the region and examined how telework and the pandemic have created a new normal. And then lastly, we wanted to add value to that analysis by looking at a few other things that are adjacent to congestion, but strongly influenced by telework. So yeah, we'll dive in. So to start with the congestion management process, this process is federally required. So metropolitan planning organizations like DRCOG are all required to take this on. It's a core function of our role as an MPO. And components of our process include a few different things, those being our annual report, which we're here to talk about today, a database of roadway attributes, traffic counts, and crash incidents, and then some multimodal data metrics. So to talk about the trends and observations we looked at, starting with vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. So the blue line you see on screen represents VMT, which is the total mileage traveled across all vehicles on all of our roads in a given day. So this is a daily metric. You'll notice that blue line, the VMT, increased going into 2006-ish, and then it flattened before increasing again and leveling out at around 85 million VMT on a given day in the region. It took a strong hit from COVID, bounced back a bit, and then increased by 1% going into 2022, and then by 2% going into 2023. And those slight increases have officially brought us back to 2019 levels. So we're only just hitting, as of last year, I should say, we're only just hitting where we were at in terms of travel in the region. And that is considering adding some 85,000 residents to the region as well. The green line you see on screen represents VMT per capita, or that VMT metric as it relates to the region's population. So similar trends. It also bottomed out in 2020 before increasing again. And we have a target in our Metro Vision plan of 23 VMT per capita. And I just wanted to call out that, from telework and from the pandemic, we did temporarily hit that target and are now moving away from it. To shift gears and talk about transit ridership. So the blue line that you see on screen represents 2019 transit ridership as a baseline, and that's accounting for about 350,000 boardings on a given weekday. The orange line represents a percent difference from transit ridership compared to 2019. So you'll see that in April, March, when COVID really started to full swing, we bottomed out at around 70% below 2019 levels and have gradually increased since then, but still holding well below where we were at prior to the pandemic. The state launched its pilot called Zero Fare for Better Air, which made transit ridership free in the region for the high ozone month of August to help mitigate air quality impacts. And it was renewed in July and August of 2023. And I call this out just to highlight that we saw the highest points of transit ridership the months that this program was active. And I do also want to note that this program was not renewed for 2024 for at least RTD. Another area that we looked at with respect to transit, we wanted to look a little bit more broadly, and we took on a kind of crude analysis. We looked at Colorado Station, and we just wanted to kind of get a flavor of what Google Earth imagery looks like prior to the pandemic and then today for this amenity that serves transit. And you can see at 2019, the Google Earth image shows that this parking lot is about at capacity. Nearly every spot is full. But as of this year, this image is from 2024. We're seeing a lot less utilization of some of our park and rides. So, not only are we seeing the impacts of ridership prevalent in, the numbers of the data, but also, in the day-to-day things we see in terms of stuff like this. And then next, I'll talk about shared micromobility usage. So shared micromobility refers to human-scaled transportation. So, vehicles smaller than a car, thinking a bike, a scooter, and many jurisdictions in the region have made partnerships or investments in the space. And as a result, we've seen a big increase in shared micromobility usage. In fact, it's more than tripled in its usage since we really started collecting data in 2019. So, this is not a silver bullet for congestion, but it's a mode we're excited to see grow because it provides people additional choices, especially in an urban context, and can help serve as a good first last mile tool with respect to transit. So to talk about how we can expect congestion to look in 2050, should the trends that we've observed continue into the future. So we can expect vehicle miles traveled to grow by 42% on the average weekday in 2050. So this means we can expect more driving, more auto travel and activity on our roadways. We're also expecting cost of congestion to increase. So when I say cost, I just want to note that's another kind of crude calculation that we use just to attach, economic terms that people can understand and relate to congestion. So it takes into account things like time spent sitting in traffic, fuel expended, goods delayed, so on. And we're expecting that general economic burden to increase going into the future. And then we're also expecting over 1/3 of lane miles to be congested for 3 hours or more. So we're expecting to see more intense congestion and a spatial spread of congestion going into the future. And then lastly, we've thrown this around a lot, but it continues to be true. Congestion at 2 p.m. in 2050 is expected to look and feel a lot like it did at 5 p.m. last year. So what this means is, that evening rush hour where you really get that traffic at 5 p.m., that same degree of intensity is going to be apparent at 2 p.m. So we're expecting a temporal shift in when congestion is really starting. It'll be spread more throughout the day. And then just to provide, sort of that spatial context. So the blue lines that you see on this map represent corridors we identified as congested in 2023. So you see Interstate 25, a lot of core arterials, a lot of Interstate 225. And then the orange lines that you see on screen represent additional corridors that we can expect to be congested by 2050. So more arterials, more freeways, including US 36, north of Interstate 25. So this is just to show that we can expect congestion to continue to evolve and worsen across the region. So to talk about our special topic, looking at some shifting dynamics along commute corridors, and just to provide a brief overview, and this analysis should seem pretty familiar. We did it last year and have decided to extend it into the 2023 report. And it really stemmed from this idea that telework became a public health necessity with COVID. People who were able to work at home were encouraged and at times required to do so. So this really impacted how people get around and the decisions that people make as it relates to their travel and commuting. Telework continues to be really prevalent. I'm sure everybody here, even DRCOG staff have the option to telework. We are able to work from home hybrid 2 days or 3 days a week and are in person 2 days a week. So it's an option that impacts where people might choose to live and how to get into the office. And again, building on analysis from the previous reports to see how these impacts are continuing. And we conducted this analysis by looking at travel time and traffic volume data from INRIX and CDOT respectively. And before we go into the specifics of the analysis, I just want to touch on the data that we've seen from the census as it relates to people working from home and people commuting by a mode other than driving, so non-single occupancy vehicle. So the blue line represents that work from home rate. It tapped out at around 10% in 2019 and really shot up from the pandemic. And we're starting to see it decline now. And you can just see that for that non-SOV rate, which includes every mode other than driving, including working from home, just how big of an impact telework has really had on this metric. And I especially call it out because we have a target in MetroVision to reach a mode share to work of 35% for non-SOV. So we're currently in attainment of this target, but we're starting to move away as we're seeing the impact of telework wane. So to talk about the corridors that we looked at, so we picked 2 corridors that I think really reflect that traditional, those traditional corridors that see peak traffic for people commuting into an office environment. So the orange line you see represents Lakewood to downtown Denver or the tech center along US 6. We recognize that as a core route. Highlands Ranch to the Denver Tech Center along C470 and Interstate 25. And then Mid-Aurora to the Denver Airport along Interstates 225 and 70, as well as Pena Boulevard. So looking at that Lakewood to Denver morning commute, when we look at volume on this corridor, we're seeing higher traffic levels in 2023 than in 2019 when you look at the whole day. And this is consistent with what we saw in our 2022 report. However, there's 6% fewer vehicles during that morning peak, so that morning rush hour. And this is actually down from where we were at in our 2022 report. So in 2022, the report showed that there were 17% fewer vehicles during that AM peak. So we're starting to see more people commuting again in this early morning hour. And we think, telecommuting and flexible schedules are a key answer, and their impacts are starting to decline, as we've mentioned. And, while there are fewer vehicles during the AM peak, PM peak has been pretty consistent. A lot of people are still choosing to leave to go home at similar times. And just to show that we're seeing lower travel times, slightly higher speeds, and again, higher volumes. Looking at Mid-Aurora to the Denver Airport, traffic was down 8% from 2019 levels in 2020. So that's really where this corridor bottomed out in terms of its traffic volume. However, in 2023, those volumes were nearly 8% higher than those same levels. So we've seen rapid growth along this corridor as we've shifted into this new pandemic normal. And this is consistent with last year, and it's also what we expect. The area continues to see new development and jobs coming online. The airport is still seeing increases in ridership. We expect travel and traffic to be prevalent along this corridor. Looking at Highlands Ranch to the Denver Tech Center, this corridor also had higher traffic levels in 2023 than in 2019, considering all time periods. And, I think that this is most likely due to construction and how it impacted the 2019 values that we looked at. So the image you see on screen is of C470, and you can see that there are managed lanes on there those were built in 2019. So with all of that construction happening, I think fewer people were taking this corridor, and I think it impacted our analysis in 2022 a bit more than I think we've given it credit for. However, despite showing higher traffic levels, we are seeing lower travel time. So I think that showcases the impact of the managed lane, which is helping to encourage people to take that when there's high traffic, which helps to alleviate traffic for others. And again, more credit deserved than we gave it in 2022. But yeah, again, seeing higher volumes, higher speeds, and lower travel times for this corridor. So some key takeaways from this analysis: telework does really continue to impact travel behavior, and it impacts where people choose to live and how they choose to go to work. And as these rates decline and more people move to the region, we're seeing shifts towards a more traditional, more traditional travel trends that we saw prior to the pandemic. We are seeing some evolution geographically. So the airport seeing its rapid growth is very different than that Highlands Ranch corridor. And we expect that, this geographic nuance will continue into the future. So to add value to this analysis, we wanted to look at a few other things that are adjacent to telework, to congestion, to the pandemic, just to add to this story. And one of the things that we looked at was downtown Denver's population, and we used zip code 80202, which has most of downtown in its boundary, noting that it doesn't fully encapsulate downtown Denver, but felt it was a good proxy. And I do want to note that for the zip code geometry, when this presentation was created, 2022 was the most recent data on hand. So from 2018 to 2019, we saw an 11% increase in population. This growth continued into 2020. Then the pandemic happened and began, and we saw a decrease in downtown's population. And I think that what this really showcases is that, as people were encouraged and required to work from home, they started to look back and to think, do I want to live this close to work? Do I want to live downtown? Maybe I prefer to live somewhere elsewhere. Maybe I'm able to have more space. And, with that, maybe I'm okay commuting if I only have to come in once or twice a week because I'm hybrid, right? So I think that is very emblematic of the decisions that people made in the peak of the pandemic. And then we saw sort of a rebound going into 2022. And while I haven't seen 2023 and on data, I expect that trend is continuing. Another data set that we looked at was from CoStar, which is a real estate data company. And this chart that you see on screen represents office vacancies across the region. And you'll see that from 2009 to roughly 2016, rates were, higher, but between 10 and 15%, before dropping to below 10% going to 2019. And, with the pandemic, we've seen that really increase. And I think that this is especially related to telework, right? As employers are figuring out what system works for them, with some degree of telework still prevalent, there's just a natural lower demand for office space. And we're seeing that drive an increase in vacancy in the region. I wanted to show that, we're just shy of 15%. And while that's high, it's not at unprecedented levels from a regional scale. So this is something that we were able to recover from, at least a degree that we were able to recover from in the past. However, the central business district is much higher at around 24.5% vacancy. So I think that really showcases, that there are higher rates in, these more urban centers. And I think they're struggling a little bit more than the rest of the region as a result of telework. To talk about retail, we've seen similar trends, except a much better rebound, much quicker from the pandemic when we look at a regional scale. But again, the central business district is higher. And I think, that's because that retail environment downtown really does respond to, the uses and the development around it. So as, there are fewer people in the office, fewer people commuting downtown, that's impacting these retail businesses. And then lastly, we looked at some trends in housing development. We figured, this is something that may not be impacted by telework, but it's such a hot topic in the region in terms of, housing cost burden, housing stock, and where we're at with our goals and population growth. So I'm not gonna run through each of these numbers, but basically what we're seeing that multi-unit or multi-family housing is still continuing to develop at a pretty strong pace. And while in a region still, when you adjust for inflation, it's not unprecedented. So just wanted to show that even though people are working from home more, this has not impacted the development of multi-unit housing in the region. So in conclusion, we paint a sort of gloomy future as it relates to congestion, right? We're expecting more congestion on more of our roads. We're expecting to have to navigate congestion earlier in the day. And, you know, I think it's more important than ever to, you know, to dig into our plans, to focus on giving people choices to avoid and adapt to the worst impacts of congestion. And, you know, we're doing a lot of that work now, right? We're doing transportation demand management. We have Way to Go, which encourages people to switch single occupancy vehicle trips into multimodal trips. We're encouraging projects that facilitate travel choices, again, to help people avoid and adapt. While this isn't directly related to congestion, you know, the state is undertaking a household travel survey, which we are partnering with them on. And this will really inform a lot of the assumptions that we rely on and the calibration of our model. So this is a really important effort that's going to help us address congestion moving into the future. We have Denver Region ITS, and of course, our wonderful partners, jurisdictions, and yeah, we're doing the work. We just gotta nose to the ground, keep moving forward, and yeah, thank you all so much. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments. And that concludes my presentation, Chair.
Max, there's some questions in the chat, and the first one is, what is the definition of the Central Business District? Is that downtown Denver DTC?
Here, one moment where I want to be able to see everybody.
Couple slides.
Okay,
It's a couple slides.
Okay. So the Central Business District, yeah, so this was data from CoStar, and I think that it was labeled based off of Denver's Central Business District boundary identification, and CoStar attached that designation to any properties that fell in that boundary. That's my current understanding.
Okay, thank you. Here's the next question in the chat. How is downtown population defined? Does it include tourists and people attending conventions?
So downtown population is defined that we took these data from the census. These are people that resided in zip code 80202. And again, that includes most of, I would say, the core of downtown, but there's parts to the northeast of downtown that are not included, but just residents, no tourists, none of that.
Okay. Does that answer the question from Director Guzman and Bill?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Director X.
Well, I was just going to provide some additional definition with regard to the CBD. It's basically on the north side. It's the South Platte, yeah, all the way down south to the Capitol complex, and then kind of 20th Street on the east, and like Spare on the west, if that helps.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Doug. Questions or comments for Max today? Yes, Director Holgan? Pardon me.
Madam Chair. So Max, thank you so much for this overview. I've been thinking a lot about everything that you've shared, and I have 1,000 questions, but one of them is I think we intuitively knew about the impact of free fare for better air, but I think this is the first time that I'm seeing it where you can see it pretty clear. And I think some of us here share the disappointment of it not being funded. Also recognize that Tabor is a pretty big giant that our legislators are going to be wrestling with. Is there any opportunity to be able to bring this back to the legislature to be able to share the impact? Because I guess it seems like there's so many opportunities to move the needle, and this one feels like a really good way to do it. Have there been opportunities to share this? If not, are there? Thanks.
So I'm going to allow, Doug or someone else from DRCOG staff to answer about, our ability to bring this to the legislature, but I would be happy to present on anything that this committee wishes me to for the legislature. But yeah, I'll turn it over to other DRCOG staff as well.
Well, Madam Chair, I may call a friend, and I think she actually has her hand up right now. So I'll turn this to CEO Johnson.
Thank you very much, Director Rex, and thank you very much, Mr. Monk, for your presentation, and to Director Hoagland for your inquiry. Just for clarification, as it relates to the legislative funding support for Zero Fare for Better Air, which was done as indicated through the course of the presentation relative to increasing transit usage, I did want to specify that the Zero Fare for Better Youth program that RTD leveraged with the support of the Federal Transit Administration during a pilot program period for a year. The state legislature is currently funding this program, Zero Fare for Youth, through December of 2026. And I call that out because in reference to the feedback that we've gotten relative to this segment of the population, we see greater transit usage with individuals aged 19 and younger. This gives us the opportunity to help create a good environmental steward, as well as increase the propensity for someone to be a transit customer for a longer period of time. So I did want to share that while the investment may not be within a month's period, from all accounts and what we've seen preliminarily with our first report for Zero Fare for Youth, incorporating the month of September of 2024, we see great upticks in ridership. And also during the course of the legislative session last year, heard directly from Denver Public Schools Office of Truancy that they have seen truancy rates go down because individuals are leveraging the system with a zero free fare and being able to take advantage of their public education. And then more so RTD, when we engage with members of the Transportation Legislative Review Committee, we do present these elements and put forward aspects of different funding opportunities through our legislative program. So with that, I will yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill.
Following up on CEO Johnson's comments, I'd just like to say that just specifically, we saw a 91% increase in youth ridership between September 23 and September 24. So we are seeing, like CEO Johnson said, we've seen a tremendous impact at the youth for our youth customers because of this program.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you, Max, for all of this information. It's wonderful. Thanks. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, we'll move on to member comments and other matters. We'll first go with the CDOT representative. Anyone that would like to give an update?
Well, if no one else will give an update, I'll be happy to do that.
Sure, sir.
This will be very brief. We're having our CDOT meeting tomorrow, and we're having a very abbreviated agenda for this meeting. So it's a virtual meeting just for the day. Probably the one thing of most interest to this group might be that Commissioner Jim Kelly made a determination that he would have to step down and resign from the commission several months ago. And his last commission meeting was the November meeting. Commissioner Kelly, the governor has appointed Cecil Gutierrez as his replacement through 2027. And Cecil, for those of you who may or may not know Cecil, has had a very long and active involvement in a lot of transportation initiatives. He currently and has sat on the CTIO board for CDOT, and so he's been very engaged, and I think he'll do a great job as a replacement. We'll miss Commissioner Kelly, but I'm certain Commissioner Gutierrez will do a great job. The other thing we have on our agenda is we're going to have a legislative update, and we'll spend some time with a rather interesting report from Pikes Peak on their 2050 long-range plan. And we have a a discussion regarding Burnham Yard, which is a continuation as we continue to try and gain a better understanding of exactly what opportunity or issue we have with Burnham. So I'll conclude that, and I see we've got Commissioner Hogan and Commissioner Cook. So I look to them for any additional comments, as well as CDOT staff that are on the call.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Thank you. Commissioner Cook.
Yeah, thanks. And a great recap by Commissioner Adams. One thing I would add is there's an action item on the Burnham Yard piece for the purchase of an easement on the east side. And among other benefits, that will allow for the elimination of 3 at-grade crossings. So some significant improvements there in safety. So thank you much.
Thank you. Mr. Pockboss, how are you?
Good. Thank you, Vice Chair. The only thing I would add is the department is continuing its work on development of the 2050 statewide plan, particularly working with our rural partners, but no doubt we'll be working with our MPO partners here in the next few months. The only other thing that I'd mention is the non-attainment enterprise does have a call for projects for a community clean transportation grant program for projects that would reconnect communities. So I did want to mention that on the call. A presentation was given to TAC yesterday, and more information will be out there. And if folks are interested, feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to give more information on that program. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Anyone else from CDOT? Again, thank you. We'll move on to RTD. Director Johnson.
Yes, thank you very much. I am proud to report that RTD's Board of Directors on Tuesday, December 3rd, adopted the agency's 2025 budget, which is a $1.2 billion budget that aligns with resources for the agency's strategic plan. More specifically put, we have focused on increased levels of service, continuing the agency's hiring efforts for key frontline positions, and to sustain our preventative maintenance program. Projects that launched in 2024 that'll continue on through 2025, so we can ensure that we're providing efficient, reliable service, and more so really investing in the future of the transportation network for decades to come. Also, I'm pleased to announce that on Friday, December 13th, RTD received its facilities blueprint and fleet transition plan. What that means specifically is in relationship to RTD undergoing an 18-month review relative to alternative fuels. There's been a lot of discussion around whether or not transit agencies are leveraging different forms of zero-emission technologies. And in our quest to transition, we had to look at facilities because the emphasis is on facilities. So that information is on our website that was placed yesterday in a forward-facing document that provides that blueprint, as well as the fleet transition, which we endeavor to delve in coming closer to 2026 as we make plans to transition. Additionally, some good news for New Year's revelers. RTD once again is partnering with Molson Coors, so RTD's customers can celebrate responsibly through this coordinated effort with Molson Coors and RTD. There will be zero fare for New Year's Eve. It will commence on December 31st at 7 p.m., in which transit services will be provided at no cost to customers and continue through January 1st to 7 a.m. And then lastly, just want to put a plug out there to keep your eyes out. The board adopted just in October, or was it November? It was November, I'm sorry, Transit Equity Day initiative. And basically that has come to fruition starting back in 2023 from the federal government, leveraging the impact of public transit in spaces, especially on marginalized populations, historically speaking. And so Transit Equity Day really celebrates the aspects in which notably Rosa Parks, being the face of the civil rights movement and the interface with public transport, has brought this to fruition. And so on that day, which would be February 4th, it would be a zero fare day. And there'll be other initiatives around that, and information will be forthcoming. So with that brief report, I'll yield the floor to any director that's assembled from RTD or my colleague, Bill Saroy. And I do see Director Guzman, but I'll yield the floor to you, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Ms. Johnson. Thank you very much. Director Guzman, you have your hand up. You're on mute.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I'm switching because my headset is dying, so you might get some background noise from the traffic. Congratulations to RTD for getting our budget passed. And I am really excited about the transit equity days coming up, but more importantly, January, our new service changes come into effect, and that is going to increase some service for different areas of Denver. If you would like to take a look at the budget and how that supports future endeavors, it's rtd-denver.com/budget. Super easy. And it will bring up the budget book for y'all to look at. We welcome 7 new directors to the board in January, and the board will be reconfigured January 7th. So look forward to some new faces, perhaps here at RTC, some returning, I hope. And it's been a great year working with all of you. So I just wanted to say thank you. This has been a really good learning experience. And I always enjoy getting to hear feedback and the thought process for the future planning of our wonderful metro area, while I try to understand which corridor is which and what area is what. So thank you. Wanted to say that.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from RTD? All right, we'll move on to the Regional Air Quality Council report. I see there's a chat in here from Mr. Silverstein. There is a indirect source emission reduction website that he put into the chat. So take a look at that, and I will turn it over to anyone that would like to speak from the RAC.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and Mike Silverstein from the RAC, and just a couple of shout outs to first of all to RTD and downtown Denver for the just fabulous job at Union Station for the holiday displays and the remodeling. It's just really cool. So hopefully that is a nice addition to attracting folks back to downtown. It's really pretty, really great effort. And also a shout out to Mayor Pro Tem Wheel from Cherry Creek Village. The holiday displays throughout Cherry Creek Village are really cool. I've always enjoyed cruising around at night at Cherry Creek Village, and it's just amazing what people do. I don't know. they must hire huge crews to decorate these homes and properties, but it's really cool. So congratulations, Randy. I see you smiling on screen there. And that besides that fun stuff at the RAC, it's a reference to the information put into the chat. We are kicking off a more intensive effort to look at what are called indirect sources of air pollution. And it really follows on nicely to the report we just saw in this meeting on the future of congestion. And what do we do about congestion? And at the Regional Air Quality Council, it's our job to look at these issues from transportation and the air quality impacts of transportation in our future, and figure out what are the options for mitigating air pollution in the face of this what I see as explosive growth in our region, even though it may not be up to past standards, the rates or all. It's just a lot of new concern from an air quality perspective and a climate perspective. And so I put in the information in the chat to invite everyone to participate in our discussions to develop recommendations for reducing emissions from what we call indirect sources. And indirect sources are those large activities or facilities that attract trips or generate trips just by the nature of their business. And so that can include large warehousing complexes, recreation facilities, shopping areas, residential development, industrial and commercial development, everything that we have in our region that is a source of growing transportation activity, whether it's attracting you and I to an event or it's generating those trips, delivering products to our home at an ever increasing rate. So just that invitation to everyone to spread the word, get information to us in our work group discussions, and look forward to presenting on activities to committees at DRCOG and other regions and possibly this group as well to give you all additional information as to what we're doing, what we're assessing in this project. So thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Silverstein. Do you have any questions or comments for Mike today? All right, does anybody have any questions or comments for the good of the group? Director Wheel.
I'll be brief. I just wanted to mention that I think some of you know I'm term limited, so this will be my last RTC meeting. It has been an honor and a privilege serving with you, and I wanted to wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you, Randy. It's been an honor to be by your side at all the meetings throughout the year. So thank you very much for your service.
Mm-hmm.
With that, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew in your packet, there's the 2025 RTC meeting schedule. I want to wish everyone a safe and healthy, happy and holiday season coming up. Our next meeting is January 14th. And if nothing else further, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, again.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.